Welcome to the Why Factor, a chance to work out why we do what we do. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
Hello, my name's Jonathan Meyerson, and before you get to your chosen podcast, I want to ask you one question. How did an insignificant army corporal end up as Chancellor of all Germany? It's a story that's improbable and also a lesson for us all. My new podcast, Nazis: The Road to Power, unravels it in 16 dramatised episodes, starring Tom Mothersdale, Derek Jacobi, Toby Stevens, Alexander Vlahos and Laura Donnelly. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for downloading from the BBC. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
BBC World Service, I'm Mike Williams with the Why Factor. On the programme today, a simple machine that changed the world, the bicycle.
I'm riding against the traffic right now, on the wrong side technically.
I do think you need to be a little bit crazy to be cycling in Delhi, but it's not in any clinical way.
If I was with tourists right now, I would have to emotionally prepare them for this sort of floating of rules.
My name is Arpita Sinha. I guide bicycle tours for a company called Delhi Bicycle in New Delhi.
Just ride on whatever surface is available for you. Chalo, chalo, bhaiya.
Broadly, the impression of somebody who owns a bicycle is that it's a poor person who distributes milk or something small and menial like that.
I actually distracted a hand cart into stopping.
It's a delivery guy's ride. It's a poor man's ride. It's not something that you aspire to at all. It's like a food chain, and we're just one rung above the petty pedestrian.
Here's one of my favorite shop signs of all time. It says Aliens Dance Academy. Learn salsa, hip-hop, popping and locking.
Oh, gosh. I have 12 bicycles. I absolutely don't need 12. I only need one.
Rob Penn, journalist, lifelong cyclist, and author of It's All About the Bike, which charts the history and social impact of the bicycle.
But I have a collection of them, because it somehow represents my appreciation of the beauty of bicycles.
Where there's a wheel, there's a way. But with bicycles, the way has been rather tortuous.
The invention of the bicycle, considering the impact that it's had, is a relatively recent event.
There were no traffic signals in those rollicking days.
The bicycle that we know today, something we'd be able to get on and comfortably ride now, took place in 1885. What happened was the invention of the safety bicycle, and everything that had been before it really was patently unsafe to ride. The high wheeler, or the penny farthing as we know it in Britain.
The front wheel has a diameter 52 inches and the rear wheel 22 inches.
What happened in 1885 was the wheels are the same size and the rider could touch the ground with his feet. And 3 years after that, the pneumatic tyre was invented, and that meant that the bicycle for the first time became relatively comfortable to ride as well. And those two things combined were real game changers and really, a major turning point in human transport.
Oh, barely hear my thoughts most of the time.
I like cycling in places where it's mostly pedestrians and few cars to contend with.
Ooh, really bad pothole there. Oh.
You need a sturdy bike.
If you don't push through impossible bottlenecks, you actually never get out.
I don't think you need very good brakes because you don't really go fast. So you can just stick your legs down and pop you stop.
I'm in the spice market now and I have a huge dog here. What a cutie.
Sometimes it can be so crowded that if you were to fall, you just keep standing on your bike, propped up by mass of humanity.
Peter Pooch. He likes to follow us and lick our feet while we're cycling. We're actually that slow he can follow us.
And a bicycle, there is a suddenness to the way you encounter things, and there is a very convenient ease when it comes to wanting to get out of it.
The invention of the bicycle had incredible consequences for society in many different ways. It was the first time in human history when the working class became mobile. From the Iron Age until the late 19th century, land transport was characterised by a predictable and slow pace. And suddenly the bicycle came along. So in 1885, it was expensive, undoubtedly, and probably cost something like the annual salary of a factory worker. But within a single decade, it had become the equivalent of 2 weeks' wages for a factory worker. So that meant that they were affordable for a large proportion of the population. And that must have been something just extraordinary, really. It definitely shored up the gene pool in countries like Britain, because it meant that people could go further than they ever had before in order to find a partner for life and to mate. And so what started as a really faddish leisure pursuit, within a decade of 1885, the bicycle became the most popular form of transport on the planet, and it has been ever since.
I cycle about 5 days a week. I live on top of a hill here in Seattle, so I start out going quite quickly down the hill and quite slowly coming back the hill. It's about 20 miles. You know, you've got this gorgeous lake out on your left.
Dr. Nan Little, a retired anthropologist. She's approaching 70 years of age, and a few years back, she took up cycling.
Mount Rainier is out in front of you. It's very beautiful. I can get on the bike and forget about other things that are going on around me, any pains or anxieties. I can think through problems and solve them. It's very much like being in a Zen state. So I find it a very calming experience. We have a 7-day ride. It's called RAGBRAI, the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. I said that I would ride across Iowa, and then I hung up the phone and thought, you're out of your mind. What's going to happen? You're going to fail.
We say in Britain it's like riding a bike. Well, lots of countries say that. Once you've learnt, you don't forget how to do it. And I think that suggests that somehow the bicycle syncs beautifully with the human DNA. Our greatest muscle mass is in our legs. So it is the most efficient means of human transportation that we have ever devised. It syncs so well with the human software.
I was not a cyclist before I got Parkinson's. I couldn't hold a pen, I couldn't hold a toothbrush, couldn't do anything with my right hand for quite some time. I leaned forward when I walked, I shuffled, I looked at the cement instead of at the landscape, and then I had a tremor in my right arm that just wouldn't stop.
Our discovery of the relationship between cycling and Parkinson's disease was really serendipitous.
Dr. Jay Albert from the Center for Neurological Restoration at the Cleveland Clinic in the U.S. state of Ohio.
Jay Alberts is a master cyclist as well as a neuroscientist.
In 2003, a Parkinson's patient,
Kathy, who had Parkinson's,
and myself and 4 or 5 other people decided to do a bike ride across the state of Iowa.
Unfortunately, Kathy and her husband had not practiced riding a tandem cycle before, and
they had some challenges.
The husband forgot Kathy was on the back.
Ralph got off the bike and she fell.
It looked like they maybe were headed for divorce court if they did this for a week. So Jay said,
"Tell you what, Kathy, why don't I ride the bike with you for the rest of today, and we'll see how it goes." Then we started riding the rest of the week together.
Well, Jay rides at 80 to 90 RPM. Because the chains are linked, Kathy had to ride at 80 to 90 RPM too.
And so in essence, what I was doing is I was forcing her to exercise or pedal at a higher rate. So what I observed was, Kathy saying,
"Jay, it doesn't feel like I have Parkinson's anymore."
I thought that was interesting.
By the end of the week, there was somebody had a birthday, and she wrote out a birthday card for this person.
And I saw that card, and I said, "Who wrote this?" And she said, "I did. Isn't it amazing?"
Her handwriting had completely become illegible.
Yet that card looked beautiful. So that was really the first sort of inkling that maybe cycling or exercise in this case was actually changing brain function.
He did a small trial with 10 Parkinson's sufferers. Those who did forced exercise showed signs of improvement of up to 35%. He's now 4 years into a 5-year trial with 100 patients. Like Nan Little, they remain on their medication. What's different is that some in the survey pedal, hard and fast, 80 to 90 revolutions a minute. Just what Nan was doing in preparation for her ride across Iowa.
So I got on my bike and I started riding 4, 5, 6 days a week, anywhere from an hour and a half to 4 hours, way over the protocols, just because I was terrified I couldn't get across Iowa. And exactly a month later, I was out walking my dogs, and I looked down and both arms were swinging freely. I stopped, I uncurled my hand, and it stayed uncurled. I turned my head to the left and the right, a fully rotational turn, swirled it around, no pain. And I just stood there and cried. Just stood there on the sidewalk and cried. I went to see my doctor the next week, and he looked at me and he said, "If I didn't know you had Parkinson's, I wouldn't diagnose it."
As you make a movement, you have information that goes back to the brain. And if you make that movement relatively rapidly and in a very regular way, then you have an increase in information going back to the brain, and the quality of that information is improved as well. We think that it's this improved quantity and quality of information that may be triggering increased production of proteins in the brain. And these proteins are thought to be the building blocks of reorganization within the brain, whether it's the acquisition of new skills or learning new skills, or in Parkinson's patients, maybe it's the improvement of existing motor skills. High rate cycling, high rate exercise in this way actually changes function.
If I don't feel well, my husband will seldom say, "Oh, poor you." He'll just say, "Go get on the bike." And so I have a bike set up in the basement, and I have my road bike for when the weather is good, and I'll go bike. And within about 5 minutes, I feel much better again. It's like putting a plug in the wall socket.
Just asked somebody to watch out. He was about to open a garbage truck door into my face.
I would say that in India there has been a bit of an increase in interest towards cycling. At least in the bigger cities, it's quite easy to access a cycling lifestyle. But it's being promoted, I think, more as a luxury activity. So it caters to a very small niche in their early 20s to 40s who are relatively well off and well traveled.
Even though I own a really nice, well-cushioned cycling shorts and would be very comfortable on these potholes, I can't actually wear it because it's a rather conservative area. So wearing cycling shorts is a no-no as a woman.
The bicycle broke down previously very rigid class and gender barriers. The institutions that had been created to keep those barriers in place, social mores and morals, the sort of clubs and societies that we all existed in, dress codes, all of these things were sort of removed when you got on a bicycle and were pedalling down a lane.
Only the humming of tyres and the talk that arises between solicitor and carpenter, teacher and typesetter, electrician and radiographer.
People who previously simply would not have met because their society dictated that they ghosted past each other and never actually encountered each other, that changed.
I'm definitely an exception as a woman who's in a T-shirt and track pants, riding a bike with a headband on. I do get stared a bit, but I think after all these years, people are really immune to me on a bike.
in very practical terms, it had a very significant effect on what women wore in public. And when they first rode bicycles, they were expected to ride in long ankle-length skirts and voluminous petticoats. And, of course, that was entirely impractical. So they adopted what was called rational dress. And rational dress was a better-fitting jacket and pantaloon trousers which are cinched below the knee, which meant that nothing got caught in the chain. And at first, there was massive public outrage. There were court cases about whether or not women were allowed to be served in pubs wearing this sort of dress. And I think by the time the suffragettes movement hit its peak in the 1910s, they were able then to look back at the 1890s and recognise that what happened on the bicycle and women was hugely important.
My office overlooks this cycle lane that we're looking at now. And around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I have to shut my window because all I can hear are cyclists shouting at each other, pedestrians shouting at the cyclists.
Judith Green is a sociology professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, a researcher into transport and health. She surveyed cyclists in the city.
There's almost a guilt now about driving in London, and people talked about it as the new smoking, the thing you have to be a little bit embarrassed about. So there's a sort of a moral hierarchy almost of transport choices, with cars right at the very bottom and bicycles at the top. So people did think that was the virtuous way to travel around London.
Across most of the world, the bicycle is just a way to get around. But here in the West, it's become a much more middle-class pursuit. There are bicycles on sale in this city for thousands of pounds. It's become as much a style thing as a means of transport.
And I think that's absolutely true. And part of the problem is because it's still very much a minority mode of transport in London. If we break down who does and doesn't cycle in London, it's disproportionately those of higher income groups. So if, as an average commuter, you look down and you see these people in the latest Lycra on a bicycle that costs thousands of pounds, you think that's not a way to get to work, that's a lifestyle choice.
Whoa, that's a huge goat. I haven't seen bigger goats anywhere in the world.
I think it's freedom more than anything else. It allows you to do so much. It's not insular. It's not a bubble. And only when you engage at such an intimate quarter, I feel, can you give back to society. If you are constantly insulated, locked up inside your little bubble of a car, you find yourself drifting. Cycling doesn't allow you those luxuries for too long. I find it extremely enriching and physical.
My doctor says I'm probably one of the strongest 70-year-old women in the United States.
Yeah, you seem to have turned into a bit of an adventurer.
I seem to have, yes. And in July of 2011, went to Africa and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And that was so much fun that the next year we went to the Himalaya and climbed to Annapurna Base Camp, and then went to Peru and climbed the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
What would happen if you did put your feet up and relax, do you think?
And stop cycling?
Yeah.
I'd probably just fade away. It's really an integral part of my life. There's no question about it. When I finish talking with you, I'll be out on my bike.
Thanks for listening to The Y Factor. If you'd like to hear more episodes, there's a wide range of programs on our website. Everything from encryption to the notion of nationality, from nudity to the moon, and much more. Visit bbcworldservice.com/Y Factor.
Hello, my name's Jonathan Meyerson, and before you get to your chosen podcast, I want to ask you one question. How did an insignificant army corporal end up as Chancellor of all Germany? It's a story that's improbable and also a lesson for us all. My new podcast, Nazis: The Road to Power, unravels it in 16 dramatised episodes, starring Tom Mothersdale, Derek Jacobi, Toby Stevens, Alexander Vlahos and Laura Donnelly. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.